Hi, it's Brett. I just wanted to add a couple of interesting points that we've learned from having done a couple of thousand OKR projects. Thing one is the objective needs to be the outcome, not the output. So frequently we tend to write down our objective as what we're delivering. Reduce call talk time or improve sales closing ratio. That's the output. Those are the tasks that we do. What we really want to focus on is what is the value we create. So why is it we want to shorten the sales cycle? Is it to improve profitability, or is it to meet customer needs faster, or is it to improve productivity of the sales force? What is the outcome that we're aiming for, not the output? So that's lesson number one. Number two is the target setting itself. How do we set the target in the key result? And I'm sad to say that I think there's some bad press out there about how that might look. So let's imagine as we're setting our targets for Q1, there's a sort of a most probable outcome. So this is often how we set our budgets. What are we most likely to be able to achieve? Because that's how we set budgets. In John Doerr's world, he calls these the committed level. What is the level that we have to hit? Of course, we have to hit that budget level. There's a level above that, though, that I call best possible. The example I always use is imagine driving to work. The best possible is what if every single light was green on the drive in and there was no traffic and there was no lineup at Starbucks and you managed to get the kids dropped off, right away and so forth. That's the best possible. It's the same asset, same training, same tool, but if everything goes right, that's the best possible outcome that you're entitled to receive. Now, you can't go beyond that because to go beyond that, I'd need a helicopter or a rocket ship or something, but that's the best possible. There's another level even above best possible, and I call that John Doerr's aspirational. Aspirational is a target that you really have no clue as how you're going to get there, but the hope is if I throw it out there, we're all going to charge towards it. An example that he often uses is landing the man on the moon this decade. That's not really aspirational. That's best possible. We had all the technology and we had the capability of closing the gaps where we didn't have the technology. And so, sure, it was a big, long, hairy, audacious goal, but it was still within the realm of the possibility. If he'd said we're going to transport ourselves across time by beaming ourselves like Star Trek does, not going to happen. That's aspirational. So understand what those three things are. Now, as they plot out across time, what ends up happening is the most probable, how we budget our time, is significantly lower than the best possible. And that's significantly lower than John Doerr's aspirational. Now, there's no reason why you can't use either of these two. Our preference is best possible because that's a reasonable guess. The aspirational stuff in our mind is really backcasting the future. And I'll talk to you about that in a second. Now, if I take a look at the performance levels, obviously, if I'm really low, my indicator is going to turn red, send help. If I'm below my budget, it's going to turn amber to say, we're not there, but we can get there with the resources you've given us. And then anything above that is obviously green. Now, you can have it even more green as you go up, but the idea is this best possible is well into the green range. Now, our experience from doing this several thousand times is we discover that there's a level that's between most probable and best possible where most of our clients end up. That's where the most frequent performance level is that we see in our clients is above most probable. And so that's where we're aiming towards. And we strongly recommend that you set your OKRs around the best possible. Now, what does that mean? It means you're not going to achieve all of them. John Doerr's right. It's about a 70-80% achievement rate is what we normally expect. And so that's how we see the planning process. And this makes it way easier for your team as well because I can get my head around best possible. Best possible is just, again, green lights all the way. Whereas aspirational, that's really tough to do because I don't know how aspirational I should be and so forth. So that's our recommendation on that topic. Now let's talk about backcasting for a second. So imagine this. We've got a timeline. We've got last year, this year, and our long-term view. What we should be able to do is take for many of the what we call run the business OKRs, things like order entry and so forth, and we're going to take last year's activity and roll it forward, based on the investments we've made on training and technology, the change in market and so on, rolling forward what we expect to do. That's sort of the run the business objectives, and that's going to end up with both our most probable and our best possible outcomes. So imagine a timeline. On the left, we have where we are last year, where we are this year, next year, and 5 years from there. What we want to do is, for many of the what we call run the business objectives, what we typically do is take last year's performance and roll it forward, or forecast. We say last year we did so much in sales, but based on better technology, changes in marketplace, changes in pricing, changes in markets, this is what we expect to do. So that's rolling it forward. Now, each of these roll forward objectives and key results have both most probable, what's in the budget, what might be in your compensation model, and best possible. Best possible is bigger than your budget, different than your compensation zone. We have a different long-term goal. Think of this as what many people call the big, hairy, audacious goal. That big, hairy, audacious goal, landing man on the moon by the end of the decade, we should be able to take that goal and backcast. Instead of forecast, we're backcasting, or rolling back the future. In other words, to land on the moon at this point in time, what do we have to begin doing this year? So we should be having those long-term goals, and then from those long-term goals, figure out what we need to do now. An example might be long-term, we want to dominate the market and we need, multiple warehousing locations and so on. Maybe we need a new ERP system. So by the time we get here, we have to have those things in place. So I should be able to backcast and go, well, this year I better select an ERP vendor. And next year we better have warehousing and inventory implemented, and so forth. So we're taking this big, hairy, audacious goal, this aspirational goal, and we're backcasting it. Now, our belief is once you've backcasted it, each of these also has the most probable, the budget number that you have in there for this year, and best possible. So our feeling is the aspirational aspect of OKRs is merely the BHAG, and then we have to cast it back into our regular OKR process. In this way, all OKRs are the same. All OKRs, whether they're rooted in rolling forward the past or rolling back the future, all have a most probable, or our budget number, our committed number, and they also have a best possible, what happens if we have green lights all the way. So that puts that backcasting, aspirational, committed thing into a context that we think makes pragmatic sense. That's lesson 2. Next part is the OKR journey itself. Now, there's a whole bunch of work you need to do up front, and that's what we're on right now. So this is about identifying your OKRs and getting the data and stuff. That will reduce itself, but there'll always be a level of activity. But there's a benefit line. And the benefits begin right away. And the early benefits are things like getting ourselves in agreement about the objectives, getting ourselves aligned about the priorities, understanding who's doing what, agreeing on what the key results are that will get us there. So the work that we need to do across this equation looks a bit like this. To begin with, what we call the learning OKRs phase, we're going to be building that OKR framework, identifying the strategic objectives, priorities, OKRs. Then we have to go out and gather the data and put it into some system of record. Then, of course, the effort level drops off quickly. But the benefits really begin to build once we build a cadence of accountability. This is making using OKRs a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly habit. This is how we talk to each other about performance, planning, and everything else. So we're going to have to learn how to run better meetings across that time at all levels of the organization. Now, the other chunk of work that needs to get done is as we institutionalize those habits. And so each quarter, we're going to have to get together and refresh this objectives and key results. And so the effort to do that will get less and less over time as you get more and more competent at it. So this is a collection of activities that we're on this OKR journey. Now, like all journeys, there's this sort of emotional curve that we go through. And this is the same as you've seen in dozens of other change situations. We start off with whatever it was that caused us to take this journey. At a certain point, we have this unrealistic expectation of what it's going to deliver to us. As we begin doing the work of collecting the objectives and key results, there's the trough of disillusionment. Then, of course, we begin seeing some benefits. We see alignment, we see better productivity, we see significantly less time in meetings and more performance gains, slope of enlightenment, and of course, eventually we end up with that plateau of productivity. Now, the trick here is to compress this as quickly as possible. So we want to get you through the work of building out the OKRs in a number of days and begin getting it implemented by the end of the month so that we can begin getting to the slope of enlightenment as quick as possible. Like with any project, if this goes on too long, the wheels fall off the go-kart. So that's the overall effort, benefits, and emotional curve of this journey. So the last thing I want to touch on is something that you're also familiar with, and that's role clarity, or RACI. As we begin building out these objectives and key results, it's really important that we understand in particular who the A is, who's accountable for that activity. Now, you probably also want to find out who's responsible, the day-to-day job performer, and who needs to be consulted. How we find people waste a lot of time is we don't know who's accountable. So when we have an issue, we call a meeting and we invite a whole bunch of people. We cast this super wide net, hoping that somewhere in there is the person that's actually accountable for this activity. Or the opposite, we have a meeting and the people that are accountable or the people that need to be consulted are not in that room, and we can't resolve the question, or we come up with a wrong answer that we then have to go back and correct later. So we need to bring forward some of the experience we have with RACI to make sure that we're clear about who's responsible for what in the OKR world. So that's it. That's a good bracing of some of the ideas that we need to bring into this OKR journey.